98 Days of Christmas, sharing the joy of Christmas.
We've got so much in store for you this Christmas season.
Lots of giveaways and more.
Christmas Recipe of the Week. Sing the Christmas Carol backwards. And Christmas Tree Photo Contest on social media. Spot the Christmas Shopper. And our annual Christmas concert. Christmas in the Promise Yard.
On Isaac, family is everything. We're sharing joy, love, and laughter this Christmas on the #1 gospel family station in the nation. Isaac 98, The Promise. The Promise.
98 Days of Christmas. Sponsored by Super Quality Supermarket. They're more than just a supermarket. Boodoo's Electrical Enterprises, where quality comes first. Join our post-budget panel discussion Monday, October 11th. Streaming live on our Facebook page and FBN TV on YouTube. Listen and view highlights and analysis from an expert panel with host, senior broadcast journalist Stephen Cummings, along with co-host Errol Lewis. From 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., our team of experts, Mrs. Mary King, Economist Joseph Remy, FITUN President and President of the Co-operative Credit Union League, Trevor Joseph, National and Caribbean President of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, Shiraz Khan, Executive Member of the Trinidad Unified Farmers Association, Miss Deborah Riviears, Secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, and Attorney Martin George, Chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. It's the post-budget panel discussion, Monday, October 11th, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., right here on Isaac. Post-budget panel discussion Monday, October 11th. Streaming live on our Facebook page and FBN TV on YouTube. Listen and view highlights and analysis from an expert panel with host, senior broadcast journalist Stephen Cummings, along with co-host Errol Lewis. From 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., our team of experts, Mrs. Mary King, Economist Joseph Remy, FITUN President and President of the Co-operative Credit Union League, Trevor Joseph, National and Caribbean President President of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International. Shiraz Khan, Executive Member of the Trinidad Unified Farmers Association. Ms. Deborah Riviears, Secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists. And Attorney Martin George, Chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. It's the Post-Budget Panel Discussion, Monday, October 11th, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., right here on Isaac.
And we want to welcome you to Isaac's 90.1 FM, our post-budget panel discussion with senior broadcast journalist Stephen Cummings and co-hosted by Mr. J. Errol Lewis. The panelists this evening are representing the Economist, Mrs. Mary King, representing Labour, Joseph Remy. He's FITUN President and President of the Co-operative Credit Union League. We've also got representing the Christian community, business community, Trevor Joseph. He's a national and Caribbean president of the Full Gospel Business Fellowship International. Representing agriculture, Mr. Shiraz Khan. He's the president of the Trinidad and Tobago United Farmers Association. We've got psychologist Deborah Riviears, and she is the secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists. And finally, we've got representing the Tobago Chamber, Attorney Martin George. He's the president of the Tobago Business Chamber. So right now, we're going to head over to our panel and to our host, Mr. Stephen Cummings, and his co-host, J. Errol Lewis. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome.
And thank you very much, Noel Richards. A very good evening to you and welcome to our 2021-2022 post-budget panel discussion on the FBN network. Well, it's Monday, the 11th of October. I'm Stephen Cummings, your host, with co-host Errol J. Lewis. Errol, good evening to you.
Good evening, and I'll excuse you for mispronouncing my name for the first.
Okay. All right. We'll work on that. Yes. I thought you were, that was done deliberately. Huh?
It was okay.
Right. Okay. We'll treat with that a little later on, I'm sure. Well, we heard on Monday last resilience in the face of a global pandemic, and as the theme for this year's budget presentation by the Finance Minister, Cummings. The Finance Minister stood on his legs for some 3 hours as he delivered a 167-page document, starting with a review and management of the economy through the pandemic. Now, the 2021-2022 budget was the second national budget presented during the COVID-19 pandemic, and was the seventh national fiscal package under the government led by the Dr. Keith Rowley administration. Now, when we look at the budget presentation, it brings into question several things. Basically, when we look at how the economy has performed, where should we be going, especially in a time when there have been calls in some quarters for some level of structural adjustment and the need to respond to not only the current realities in Trinidad and Tobago, but the post-pandemic era. My layman's understanding, and I was talking with Errol just before we came on set, my layman understanding of the budget is really about balancing your domestic and foreign shopping list as against your available revenue stream, and your or one's ability to consider savings along with debt servicing where necessary. Now, while the Finance Minister on Monday spoke of a strong and robust financial sector and an economy that stood strong through prudent economic management under his watch, on Friday, Opposition Leader Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, in her response, talked about an economic meltdown, an economy that crashed even before COVID-19 came. She also referenced a budget indicative of a declaration of war on citizens. While this evening and for the next hour during the 2021-2022 post-budget panel discussion, we have a number of experts who will help us unpack, strip away and analyze what was presented on Monday and Friday last. And to introduce our panelists, again, I go over to my co-host, Errol.
Good evening to our panelists and good evening to our listeners and viewers. It is my duty to introduce you to our distinguished panel this evening, and we begin with the ladies. First, our economist, Mrs. Mary King. She is a graduate of UWI in economics and mathematics. Ms. King is a former independent senator and former Minister of Planning, Economic and Social Recovery and Gender Affairs in the former administration. Also with us this evening is Ms. Deborah Riviears, a psychologist. Ms. Riviears has worked in a variety of settings, including tertiary education, community service for adults, victim support, and in private practice, and has treated young adults and children. Welcome, Ms. Riviears. Also with us this evening is Mr. Joseph Remy. I wonder if I have time to elucidate on Mr. Remy's long, distinguished CV. I will just tell you that he is the President General of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions and Non-Government Organizations, FITUN. He's also President of the local umbrella body for credit unions, the Co-operative Credit Union League of Trinidad and Tobago. With us also this evening is Mr. Trevor Joseph. He's a Christian businessman, former executive member of the Coover Point Leasers Chamber and the Chaguanas Chamber of Industry and Commerce. And so he's founder and managing director of T&Z Marketing Limited. Welcome, Mr. Joseph. Mr. Martin George, attorney at law and the principal of the law firm Martin George and Company, is with us this evening. He's also served as a board member of the Tobago division of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce as its vice president, and he's now chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber, an organization he founded. Welcome this evening, Mr. George. And of course,
good evening to you and thank you.
Fundamental to life and all of us is agriculture. And so representing agriculture this evening is Mr. Shiraz Khan. And I don't want to go through all of the list of all of the achievements of Mr. Khan, but I've got to tell you that he's one of us, because he's been here before.
Yes, indeed.
With you, Stephen. So I want to welcome the entire panel this evening to our discussion here, and hope that we can bring some kind of balance to the discussion that we're hearing outside of this room.
Indeed. So we begin with Mr. Shiraz Khan. Over to you, Trevor.
Mr. Khan, I've been told that I have to ask you to respond in the first statement, but before you do that, let me just read what I saw in Sunday's Guardian, penned by Mr. Former Minister, Mr. Mariano Brown. And he said, a budget speech is a political statement providing broad guidelines on the country's economic direction and government's economic agenda. He said the man in the street is primarily interested in the adjustments required at a personal level. Business is interested in the impact on future operating performance. But because it is a political statement, it is a balancing act, a communication exercise that contains elements of window dressing and gallery, geared to improving electoral prospects and maintaining public confidence. He ends the first paragraph of his treatise by saying, bad news must be avoided or delivered with honey. I have to ask you, Mr. Khan, what is your impression, your thumbnail impression of what was presented to us as a budget for the performance of Trinidad and Tobago going forward?
All right. Let me say again, pleasant evening to all the brothers and sisters on the panel, and to you all for having me tonight, and all the viewers and listeners. Also, pleasant evening to Comrade Joe Remy, fellow trade unionist with me for a number of years, and so on. Let me just go to the statement you read from the newspaper. Actually, I put it in a very layman term to that technical speech that Mr. Mariano Brown wrote. I say they are talking to their tribal members. They are preaching to their people and hoping that they can attract a couple more coming into the Tobago election and every year to put in a few more to increase their numbers of people so that they can develop something for, because every budget, every party that go into office, they always think about the next election. It's not about country, it is not about the development for the people, but is what do they do for financiers and for the next election. I think you all have me here to talk plain, so I'm talking very plain this evening. When I heard the budget, and it's something that we have seen from previous governments, previous governments, to any government, did any government or anybody presenting a budget speak about the inadequacy of the last budget of 2020 to 2021? Did we hear about the monies allocated if it all was spent and was achieved? Of course, they will say yes, but we can prove otherwise. One of the biggest, in terms of the agriculture budget, that I am very disappointed with, is they boast about last year that they were putting $500 million in a stimulus package to help the development and projects and the development of agriculture. We didn't hear anything. We have not seen any significant growth or development in agriculture. In fact, we are worse off this year than we were last year or the year before and many years before. Because if you go back to 20 years ago, when they and I don't want to take time because we don't have that much time.
Yes, Mr. Khan, if you can just, yes.
Every year, the agriculture is given importance and bring it on the front burner. How long would we continue to complain about our society? Because one thing I want to share with you all, I can't stay long, is that COVID, diabetes, heart problems, cancer is one thing that causes all of these things to escalate, is our nutrition.
All right, Mr. Khan, I'm sorry to to come in here, but we'd come back to you to develop that point a little later on. I know that you have a lot to say. When we start talking about agriculture, it's really a long, extended discussion. So we'll come back to you shortly, Mr. Khan. I wanted to at this point to address a question to Mrs. King, Mary King. Welcome again, Mrs. King. I remember when we had the national budget statement 2020-2021 presented by the Finance Minister, Colm Aimwood, in the House of Representatives, and that was on the 5th of October 2020, titled Resetting the Economy for Growth and Innovation. And even before the presentation, many persons predicted that it would have been a COVID-19 budget, one steeped in austerity measures. Now, among the estimates of revenue and expenditure for that period, we saw where we had a $15 billion budget. Ms. King, what is different from the previous, 2020, 2021 to 2021, 2022? What is different as you look at the fiscal package and what has been presented? Are you seeing anything that is different? Because when we talk about budgets moving from one budget to the next, usually the expectation is that there should be some kind of improvement in terms of our fiscal position.
Yeah, well, to answer your main question, which was something about 15 billion, I didn't quite get it. So you want to repeat that?
Yes, there was a $50 billion budget for the 2020-2021.
Yes, I thought you were saying 15. And
50.
Yeah, I agree that we should really be looking at the country as a country and not as a year-to-year accounting package. We have to remember the type of economy that we have. And I don't think anybody can understand where we have to go unless they understand what kind of structure our economy has. So I would like to just open by giving you a little picture of where we are as a country and where we think we should go. Now, we're a very small open economy, totally dependent on oil and gas. I think everybody knows that. And we are totally dependent on energy sector for foreign exchange, because we cannot produce all the things that we consume or all the equipment that we use, and therefore we have to earn foreign exchange. We have needs and therefore we have to import. And going back to Shiraz, our food import bill is roughly 5 billion TT. So we're not in a very good position at the moment. In the last few years, since 2016, we have actually been in a recession due to fall in energy prices, fall in production locally, both oil and gas. We have been running budget deficits, and therefore, because we're running budget deficits, we have to borrow, and therefore our debt is going up.
Yes.
If we look at the situation with COVID, there has also been disruptions in the global supply chain of all the commodities and all the equipment that we use, which has also brought about rising prices. So we have inflation also is on the move and on the rise, not only here, but throughout the world. Now, governments across the world have had to respond to the pandemic. So
Indeed.
To criticize how much we're spending, what we're doing, is not really been very logical. Every country across the world has had to do what our government has done. The government has tried to maintain a specific level of spending because they have to save lives, they have to save livelihoods, and we've had shutdowns to save lives and to save livelihoods. We have good credit rating and we have good support from the multilateral agencies. And of course, you know that recently the IMF has also contributed across the world to all the contributing countries, and Trinidad and Tobago received 644 million special drawing rights. So this has allowed us to maintain a semblance of stability.
Okay.
Recently, we've had a little uptick in oil and gas, both production and price, and therefore the minister is seeing that there's a little lacuna where we may be able to now grow a little bit, and even petrochemicals have gone up.
Okay.
So we can see a possible turnaround in the energy sector.
It's okay.
At the moment.
Okay, I'd want you to develop that point a little further because I think.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
I said I would want you to develop that point a little further, but and come back to you in a short bit.
That is perfect. That is
yes.
perfect. I understand.
Yes. I want to just because there's so many of our panelists here, Errol, and we want to try and get everybody's point in. I think at this moment I'd want to go to Mr. Martin George to give us a perspective on not just Tobago, but his initial response to the fiscal package. Mr. George, good evening to you and welcome again.
Yeah, hi, good evening to you, good evening to fellow panelists, and good evening to all your listeners on Isaac 98.1 FM. The government has been in a difficult position, not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think because also of the fact that for years we have been running deficit budgets and our over-reliance on the fossil fuel sector has caught up with us, and we are now paying the price for it because internationally they are not paying the price that we want. Our production is down. When we ran the last set of bids for the deep water drilling explorations, those were largely not taken up by international players. So therefore, we have been in a hole even before the pandemic. So the pandemic has only exacerbated our economic situation and exposed the frailty of our over-reliance on the fossil fuels. And we are in a position where we need to see some kind of genuine thinking outside the box, some type of innovative leadership. And unfortunately, even though we're in a crisis, I think in every crisis there presents an opportunity. And I did not see anything inspiring in that regard in the budget presentation of the minister. Basically, it appeared to be just a holding position. Well, let's, tighten our belts and, hold fast to our position.
Okay.
And that's all well and good to avoid a further slide. Mm-hmm. However, we need to also think for the future in the sense that, listen, when are we going to pivot in any serious way to renewable energies, to, wind turbines, to solar energy? What is the kickback? The technology is there. It's all over the world. You saw some bit of tokenism in that regard, with the minister saying that he's granting tax concessions and breaks for those importing electric vehicles up to 2 years old, but that's not enough. I'm talking about us revolutionizing the way we think and the way we approach it. We have to learn from others who have seen the light at the end of the tunnel a long time ago. I mean, just think of it. Years ago, British Petroleum, BP, one of the largest fossil fuel producers in the world, they changed their meaning of their logo. When they say BP, it's no longer British Petroleum. You know what it is? It's Beyond Petroleum.
Okay.
So they started thinking.
Okay, Mr. George. I know, yes, so that, there is this concern about, how we are positioned and, to take, the opportunities that are there in the midst of a crisis. I heard the comment that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and I think maybe you're along the same lines. I want to come back to you, in a short bit as well, Mr. George, because I know we have to talk about Tobago, what's happening in Tobago. But let me just hand it over to my co-host, Errol, and he would want to also chime in here with a question.
Well, I want to ask Ms. Deborah Riviears. We're talking about the thinking behind the budget. And given the fact that we've had 2 years of trauma in terms of how the country has had to think, has the minister provided any kind of solace to the population given his statements last week? Ms. Riviears.
Hi, good evening, fellow panelists. Good evening to viewers and listeners of ISAC 90.1. To answer your question, I would say no. I want to start by saying that the theme for the budget was resilience in the face of a global pandemic. And if we listen to that theme, and you know what has been happening the last 20 months, resilience can be defined as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, death, illness, separation, health problems, etc. Was anything in the budget said by the minister, does it pertain specifically to the resilience of citizens, their mental health? I did not hear that. Yes, I heard.
So you're talking about the mental resilience. You haven't heard anything about the mental resilience. How is that going to be treated? With?
That's right.
Okay.
And remember, resilience, particularly at a time like this, when we are still, it's COVID. It was COVID last year, and it is still COVID this year. How is that going to be treated with? Now, as yesterday was Mental Health Day was celebrated worldwide, and the theme was mental health in an unequal world. And when we look at in an unequal world, we look at, there are high-income countries, there may be low and middle-income countries. Is the treatment, are people able to access assistance for mental health problems fairly in Trinidad and Tobago? I don't know that is happening. I don't believe that is happening, and I don't think that was addressed in any significant way. Now, the UN Secretary General has stated that in high-income countries, 75% of persons report that they do not receive adequate treatment. And in low and middle-income countries, more than 75% of persons get no treatment at all. In Trinidad and Tobago, where do we fit in? There's a high percentage of persons who do not get any treatment at all. There are a high percentage of persons who are afraid to get treatment because of stigma and discrimination. So we need, I don't think that was addressed, we need to look at how it is planned, what is invested, what interventions can be done for mental illness and the well-being of citizens in our country.
Thank you very much. And I want to go from there and ask a question of Mr. Remy, because we're just talking about the individuals in the population, and most of the individuals in the population form part of the workforce in Trinidad and Tobago. We heard about the lack of sensitivity in terms of the pivot from fossil fuels to renewables. We heard that the budget did not provide enough information or enough solace to the population in terms of mental health. And so, Mr. Remy, what are the positives you can bring to the table tonight and say, I heard these positive things in the budget debate?
You give me the very most difficult question. Special good night to everyone and my brother Shiraz. It is always a pleasure to be in these discussions. And yes, there were some things that were said that will enlighten some of the average citizens. So the issue with respect to the rebate on the tea and tech bills, it will raise some hope in persons whose bill is under $300. But the hope could be diminished because right in the same budget, the minister made mention of the fact that they're going to review the rate structure. And when you review the rate structure, then the taxment area for under $300 are going to change. It have a fundamental shift, so less persons would be in that under $300 taxment. So it is not going to really realize the impact. They talk about the utility card, but that is not a permanent established situation. That could change every year. So the issue is that the policy position with respect to those persons, that is something that I have a concern with. Then they talk about digitization. Now, that always sounds good. It sounds positive. But how much of the policy positions and the prescriptions have demonstrated that they are going to create jobs, sustainable employment for the average citizen in Trinidad and Tobago? And by creating sustainable jobs, then you have a situation where your tax revenue is going to increase because you have more persons employed, paying taxes to the country. You improve on your compliance system, so you can have more persons. You don't have so much of persons who are defaulted in their tax obligations, because we have the minister in the public administration said we have a $13 billion gap with respect to what was supposed to be collected as tax revenue. So yes, there are some things that the average person on the street, the removal of VAT on certain basic food items, it is going to resonate good with certain persons. But it is not going to bring about that fundamental improvement in the standard of living that people expect, because there are going to be other fundamental increases that is going to impact on persons' well-being. And from a labor perspective, the issue of job creation, stimulation of the economy to create sustainable jobs is something that we see was missing in the budget presentation. So the minister will get marked for some of the fiscal measures we put forward, but right there at the same time, some of those measures are going to bring some level of hardship to citizens again.
Okay, and you're listening to and viewing the 2021-2022 budget, post-budget panel discussion on the FBN network. I'm Stephen Cummings and my co-host,
J. Errol Lewis.
Yes, we're happy to have our panelists here this evening discussing the issues which are so very important. When we look at these budgets which are presented, year after year, I think what happens is that the language sometimes is not communicated in the way that I believe the man, when we talk about the ordinary man in the street, there are certain fundamentals which are important. And I think that even from my perspective, maybe we need to look at the way that we present, budgets in Trinidad and Tobago.
So let's
but that's another discussion that I know. But you may want to.
I want to talk to another ordinary man in the street, Mr. Trevor Joseph.
Yes,
Mr. Trevor Joseph. I'm listening to Mr. Remy, and he talked about the fact that in the give and take in the budget, the minister gave in terms of the $300,
and he took,
and then he took by saying that expect increases in the utilities, and so someone circulated something that showed VAT was taken off the pigtail, but the rest of the pig, you had to pay VAT and everything else. The shoulder,
the rest was vatable.
The rest was vatable.
Yes.
Mr. Joseph, you're representing the Christian community. Should we go down in sackcloth and ashes and start praying?
Well, it's a good option. But really, there are some inbuilt injustices in the system, and I'm speaking here now to the regular person who is listening to 98.1 and may have an adverse opinion of businesses and business people, and projected as if we are the greedy ones, we are the ones who want to, live off high and don't give to the community and don't care about communities and so forth. But that is far from the truth. You will know that most of the letters you get as a businessman is from people who have needs and looking for some form of assistance. Not a day will go by that I wouldn't get a call or get a letter. Just letting you know, I can't meet everybody's need, but I try to help when I could. But the injustices I'm talking about, and I'm talking to the people who are listening, I'm trying to simplify it as the moderator rightly said, ordinary man, right? My background is I came from abject poverty and built a business from nothing. So I have a heart for the dispossessed, and what I see is if on the 25th of the month that my VAT is due, if I don't find the money to pay the VAT, if I go on the 26th or the 27th, automatically there's a 20% surcharge put on what I have to pay. And on top of that, a daily interest is added on for not paying VAT. But if you have to get a VAT refund, that can take as long as they wish, as long as the government wish to take, 5 years or maybe more. And they don't ever give you interest on the money that they have for you. When I bring in goods from import, I have to pay with a certified check. They wouldn't even take your regular check after 35 years in business. No trust. You have to give them a certified check to pay the taxes and the VAT. So you have to, they ensure that they get their share of the import duties and VAT on arrival of the goods. But there's no reciprocal for us. For refunds we have to get, it's a big problem. Look, we got $640 odd million soft loan. It's a point, Ms. Mary King will know the percentage, less than 0.5% interest, and there's a way to use it without having to pay any interest at all. But that is, and the government said they were going to use that to help businesses, because the biggest problem with businesses today is that we don't have the US dollars to buy our goods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have approximately 100 employees. That's 100 homes depending on me at the end of the month or the end of the week to help them in some way. And every month my stock levels are going down because I cannot get the money to buy the goods to replace the stocks that they sell. So eventually, if it continues like that, you'll have no stock to sell. And now the freight, this is a huge problem. I'm speaking to the people on the street who are listening to our program now. The freight used to be, for instance, a container of tiles from Brazil would cost about $4,500, and the freight used to be at one time under $1,000. It went up recently. Within the last 2 years, it went up to about $1,600. It is now $8,000 plus US dollars. So you're paying, well, about $5,000 for the goods now because goods went up also. And you're paying $8,000 for the freight. So an item that would cost like $15 to land, that would sell for $15 in your store 3 months ago, 6 months ago, is now costing more than $15 to put back in your stock.
Okay.
And the US dollars, you can't find it, and if you go in black market, that's how you're encouraging people to break the law. And
Okay.
I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never bought money black market because it is against the law. So those who want to do the crookedness will get through and will succeed, and they will charge the price to the consumer. And those who want to be honest will suffer.
All right.
And I don't know how we're going to address those things in the place, because the credit card for the business used to be $20,000 US dollars you could use a month. Before it was unlimited, whatever the credit value was, you put in the $30 you have to spend. Now the credit card went from $15,000 to $6,000 now, US dollars. So you can only buy $6,000 US dollars worth of goods.
All right.
And you're getting 8,000, 10,000 for the week, every 2 weeks. So it is impossible. I'm saying to the people.
Right. So there are issues there relative to that very same subject matter there, Mr. Joseph. We come back to you in a short bit, and we just like to remind our listeners and viewers that this is our 2021-2022 post-budget panel discussion on the FBI network. Stephen Cummings with my co-host here.
J. Errol Lewis.
Yes.
Don't forget the name.
Indeed. Well, I wanted to sort of, I know we have to go, I believe we have to go for a break
Yes.
very shortly. But before we do that, I just want to bring back in Mrs. King here. Mrs. King, when you spoke a short while ago about the budget, the deficits that we've been running for so many years, I wanted to ask, is there now or another case for a drawdown or a pull on our HSF and our CF consolidated fund in service of national expenditure? Because I think that within the law, the government does have that bit of leg room. But should we be looking towards the HSF, looking towards, some people say, our piggy bank, as it were, or should we be looking for other ways of helping to finance? We have it's a $52 billion budget this year, which is an increase, a slight increase of the previous years. And we have been averaging, 40, 45 to 50. I think the biggest was somewhere around 63 billion. But coming up to 2021, 2022, where should we be going, Mrs. King?
Yeah, but I wanted to point to what Mr. Joseph has just been complaining about. We don't have foreign exchange. And has he asked the question, why do we not have foreign exchange? Isn't it that we are dependent on oil and gas, which is declining, prices fluctuate, some days and for a long time they've been down. So the real question is, why are we still dependent on oil and gas? And that is the issue that we have been trying to get the population, trying to get governments, trying to get opposition people, who none of them understand that we have to change the whole structure of this economy. To ask, should we be drawing down, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund was established for reasons that if the oil and gas price fall, then you have an opportunity to go into your Heritage and Stabilization Fund and use it until the economy and the oil and gas stabilize. That's the stability part of the fund.
Yes.
Then you have the heritage part of the fund, which is supposed to be building the future. Now, heritage, building a future, is building something constructive that will grow and continue to grow and always be innovative, so that we're forever growing, and then you have built a heritage. But to tell me that that heritage fund is probably going to be used to give people handouts in future when they all grow to adults and we have no more oil and gas. Now, have you ever seen anything so ridiculous in your life? Have you ever heard of any family putting the savings aside, not building upon your assets now, so that in the future I hand those assets over to my children and grandchildren, and they continue hopefully to grow them. So for the government to be saying we shouldn't, or for anybody to be saying we should not be using the stabilization fund, that is wrong. It was built for that purpose, and we should be using the heritage fund, at least the interest part of it, for growth and development and building a new innovation system, which is what Dr. Trevor had recommended to the government, which I have recommended for 20 years, and we're still talking about we shouldn't touch the fund. It's total stupidity.
Okay, okay, Mrs. King. I know you'll have much more to say on that. But gentlemen, ladies, I think at this moment we have to take a break. We ask you to hold your positions, and we come back and continue our discussion this evening.
Join our post-budget panel discussion Monday, October 11th, streaming live on our Facebook page and FBM TV on YouTube. Listen and view highlights and analysis from an expert panel with host, senior broadcast journalist Stephen Cummings, along with co-host J. Errol Lewis from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Our team of experts, Mrs. Mary King, Economist Joseph Remy, FITUN President and President of the Co-operative Credit Union League, Trevor Joseph, National and Caribbean President of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, Shiraz Khan, Executive Member of the Trinidad Unified Farmers Association, Miss Deborah Riviears, Secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, and Attorney Martin George, Chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. It's the post-budget panel discussion, Monday, October 11th, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., right here on Isaac.
Hey, David, what you now, boy? How you looking spritey so? Just the other day you complaining to me about back pain, chest pain, your foot swell up, circulation, all kind of thing. What you take for that, boy?
Jamal, boy, I went by the feet lady, and not just me. I carry the family too. Boy, the family I straight arthritis, kidney problem, diabetes, circulation, acid reflux. You call all of them just now. I had a pinched nerve too, and a cousin with lupus. And boy, the feet lady help you with all of that. And Naya Tony, buddy. She's no joke. She even helping you if you had a stroke. Call she today, boy. Don't make joke. Call Naya Tony, the feet lady of reflexology, today at 478-7416.
And welcome back to our post-budget panel discussion. I'm Stephen Cummings and my co-host.
J.R. Lewis.
Yes.
I've been naming myself every time.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us this evening. I think it's very, very. It's important that we have the different perspectives on budget, 2021, 2022, so that we can get a clearer perspective from experts like yourselves as to where we are going. But I know Errol has a question that he'd want to pose. But before I go over to Errol, Mr. George, the business of Tobago, I know that we had an allocation of some 2-point-something billion again, and I think I've been hearing the cries, from many budgets that Tobago needs. What Tobago is getting is probably not what it should be getting. And that might be a kind of a political, statement or coming from some quarters. But what is your assessment of what has been given for Tobago? And, outside of that, we've been talking about, self-government and all of that. I know that probably is another, another topic that we can treat with at another time. But, that which would have been allocated for Tobago. What is your view? Are you satisfied with that? Do you think that that Tobago needed to get a little more of the national fiscal pie, as it were? What is your view on the Tobago situation?
Okay, so the problem with Tobago, if you look at it for the last 20 years, has not been what Tobago is getting. The problem has been what is Tobago doing with what it gets. Because, we all know the old adage, a fool and his money are, soon part,
yes.
So if it is that we keep giving you more and more money and you are not using it wisely, then it doesn't matter how much more we give you, because at the end of the day, you will have nothing to show for it. And that has been my constant critique in terms of how the monies given to Tobago are spent, utilized, allocated. Because if you look at even this present budget, all right, from 2.357 billion, you have more than 2 billion of that being allocated to recurrent expenditure. That is wholly unsustainable.
Salary and wages, yes.
Of the allocation has been, set aside for paying salaries, rents, paying for equipment, so it's all your recurring expenses. If you think of it, we have a prominent businessman here in the form of Mr. Trevor Joseph. We have economist Ms. Mary King. It just makes absolutely no business sense or economic sense if you are spending 88% of your allocation just on recurrent expenditure. I have said repeatedly that Tobago needs to put in place the fundamentals for infrastructural development and creating an entrepreneurial environment whereby you can have business flourish. It's not just a question of you coming with a begging bowl every year like Oliver Twist. Sir, can I have some more, please? You know, and then you have people in Tobago grumbling and saying, well, we should have gotten more. Gotten more to do what? What are your plans for trying to create a sustainable economy in Tobago as opposed to one which is basically just still tied to the navel string of the treasury in Trinidad?
And that's a very important point that you've made.
You have to think of it in those terms.
Yes, a very important point.
It's not just a question of what they got. It's a question of what are they doing with what they get.
Right, a very important point that you've made there,
Mr.
George. And I want to sort of, I know Shiraz Khan wanted to say something, but let me just, go over to my co-host here. He also had a question he wanted to ask
and I would
as well.
pose the question to Shiraz Khan because we're talking now about agriculture. We're talking about diversification. We're looking at the fact that British Petroleum has changed its business model and they're now looking at renewables. But we are still dependent on taxes coming from fossil fuels. And that's the first part of my question. And the second part of my question has to do with the fact that some people are complaining that there's no comparison between what was budgeted and spent last year and what is being budgeted this year. What kind of comparison are we getting? Mr. Khan.
Okay, thanks again for the question. Like I said in my opening thing, right, we talk about a stimulus package again this year of over $300 million. But I asked the question initially, and I keep asking the question, what happened to the $5 million that was supposed to be a stimulus package for development and programs?
That's 500, huh? 500, yes. 500.
$500 million, right? I mean to say, if we don't know where that money went, how could we put another $300 million and the same thing will happen again? I am a bit confused as where is the accountability of last year money, and then we see our Pre-Larceny squad suffering without the resources to achieve their goal. We also have the AI unit running with one person to satisfy the entire country. AI means artificial insemination of sheep and goat and cows. And we also have the AI unit not being able to have vehicles. We have some vehicles that is over 15 years being serviced to the farmers of this country. So if we are to talk about another $300 million into the stimulus package, we need to know where the other $500 million went. And I think it is very critical that we get those answers. And I'm calling on the independent senators, some one of them to ask those questions for us. We need to get the independent senators to really do the work of the ordinary people, because they're supposed to be independent and they're supposed to be people that groups or organizations recommend, right? But if that satisfies your question, my brother, I think it is very difficult for us to really grow in agriculture when, as I said before, agriculture is the other diversification to take us out of this problem. Because I will tell you something, if monies are not circulating and people are not doing, because I am saying, and Ms. King just mentioned that we talk about $5 billion in the food import bill. I think with the present percentage of the increases of the importation of food in this country, I think it is way beyond that. And I am saying we have the resources, we have the ability, all we need is political maturity to really use some more of our local and cut that with that. I mean, to say, you could tell me that people are importing parsley in Trinidad and Tobago when we have parliament could feed the entire Trinidad and Tobago, even export parsley out of Trinidad and Tobago. But yet we are doing that, and we are shooting ourselves in foot, and we have no protection for our local farmers.
Okay.
But I just want to ask a question that you asked Ms. King just a while ago. It is very critical for all of us to understand, because I'm seeing it happening. That Ms. King was, I heard that we had almost from 2008 to 2021 deficit budget. But what happened to create some of the things? I am seeing a lot of agricultural lands are being sold out into private PPP, private partnership, private public partnership.
Yes.
Public-private partnership.
Yeah. And what happened is that just recently we see 1,176 acres of land went to one person to do development in agriculture, when we were asking for that to be used for 300 farmers, 300 people that are presently was unemployed, to make use of something like that rather than give it to one mega farm. That mega farms have failed in this country a number of years. But why it is that we are selling out our resources, our properties, to recover monies to help with the deficit?
Okay.
I don't know if that's a feasible question, but it's something that I can ask a fellow panelist.
But I mean, if you are suggesting that the bigger farm, the mega farm as you call it, the 1,200 acres, that's not really a big farm.
In Trinidad and Tobago is.
Yeah, but no, the issue is, will you be using really efficient techniques and using the new technologies? Because you know, and I know, that we can never ever be sustainable in food. We import too many basic things, flour and rice and rye and wheat and all those things, which mount up to millions and millions of dollars. We, yes, can have a little import substitution, but if you want to have effective agriculture, you have to get into the new technologies. You have to be using the technologies. There is no way that we are now at what, 1.2 billion out of a GDP of 143 billion. That is the share of agriculture.
Quite
So let's be
significant.
real.
Yes. Yes.
We could never replace the oil and gas money from agriculture. We have to be looking at setting up institutions, research and development institutions, including with the private sector. Government has to be the leader, because you know our private sector is very risk averse. They're retailers, really. They are not going to get involved in development.
Okay.
And therefore, if you want to really improve upon your agricultural status and its share in our GDP, then you have to be real.
All right.
You have to get into the technologies, you have to have a lot of capital, and you have to have the skills and the training and the research and development institutes to carry it forward.
All right, that's a very
view.
important point there again, being made as we talk about this business of agriculture.
And I want to therefore pivot to Ms. Lee Rivieres, because what we are suggesting here is a change in thinking, a change in the way the entire population sees itself going forward. What do we do in order to stimulate that change in thinking? Ms. Lee Rivieres.
Okay. See, there will have to be some type of awareness, some type of education. We must remember that many of the ideas that we have now are systemic, they are entrenched, and they are cultural, they have been handed down and passed down, and that leads to many times stigma and discrimination in different folds. So therefore, in order to do that, these things have to be started in the communities, they have to be started in schools, it has to be taught, because some of these things are taught in the institutions that we have now, it's passed down. So change of thinking, change is difficult generally. And to change your thinking, sometimes what you value, what you have learned, it's even more difficult. Are we prepared to do that? To do that, we may have to turn things upside down to say, as an example. But it is worthwhile. Is it worthwhile? It is worthwhile.
Okay.
That's what we keep saying. It's very hard to change the culture.
Maybe another generation. Yes, yes.
And but you cannot fear change when you see your country going down the chute.
And what about if you don't see it, Ms. King? Because whilst we look at all, people look at your physical health and, you're ill, you have diabetes.
Very important.
Pressure, but what about your mental health is just as important.
Very important.
As your physical health.
And therefore,
it goes hand in hand.
Therefore, I want to put the same question. I want to put the same question to Mr. Remy. We're looking, and you represent workers. You represent the body of people in the country. How do you and your organization intend to assist us in this change?
We have been a very willing partner, and I sometimes, we have to say like it is. We were part of the National Child Partners Advisory Council. We made the ultimate sacrifice and said we will sit there once again. Remember, we had the social dialogue task force under the previous regime. We had different iterations of social dialogue. But nobody, no government, because of political manipulation, wants to have a genuine social dialogue process. And Mr. Riviears was right. Because if the change doesn't start at the top, then it can't filter down with the leadership. We sit in a leadership-driven environment. And that is the challenge that we are having. We went in there with genuine intent. And what we were seeing was it was being used as an arm of cabinet, not tripartism as announced by the ILO, tripartism as discussed in a particular environment. We made a simple recommendation. Let us move away from the political machination. Let us put some legislative framework to the tripartite process. So it could be an arm, it could be something that is legislated for, reports to Parliament, so no political party could manipulate the tripartite process. That was never accepted. So the minister could boast and say, when he spoke Friday night at Figure Corner, he asked the Labour for 3 things and they get it. What is they get? A promise to start negotiations in 2022, negotiation that is outstanding for 2014 to 2016. And you're going to start. When you're going to conclude? Is the minister interfering in the free collective bargaining process between the CPO and the representative majority union? Those are fundamental questions that need to be asked. And the change has to start from on top, behavioral, and the politicians must see themselves as servants. They went in there to represent the people's interests. I have a representative, and she will not take any ideas from us because she has to put a party line. So the representative politics is a sham only to get into the Parliament.
Okay.
And that is those are the transformational things that we need to see.
Right, transformation. Okay.
Mr. Trevor Joseph, I have a question for you, and sorry for jumping you, Stephen. But Mr. Joseph, you're representing the Christian community. Yes? I want to pose a situation to you. So Noah lands on a mountain with an ark. He is in a boat. He is sailing, and he lands on a mountain in an ark, and immediately he has to change his career and goes into farming. He goes into all kinds of other occupations, on a population distribution. He goes into government. What advice are you prepared to give to the political directorate, both the opposition and the executive? What advice are you prepared to give to them and say, listen, this is the example we have before us, and these are the things I think we should do in order to cause this thing to galvanize into a certain kind of action?
Now, a big word in God's economy is justice. And this must not only be done, but parents must be done. Noah found faith in God's eyes, the Bible tells us that, and that's why he and his whole family were rescued. Take, for instance, I was making an example of the businesses and the laws that we are forced to operate under, which is good. I have no problem with that. I ran a business in the United States for almost 10 years, and I know the laws, and it's very draconian if you break the laws. So I have no problem being law-abiding and obey the laws. But the government that set the laws must also obey the laws. If I don't file my annual returns, if I don't file my audited accounts, I have problems to face. I cannot tender for a government contract unless I get VAT exemptions and inland revenue exemptions to show them that the date and so forth. But I want to ask my friend in Tobago, when was the last time the THA submitted their annual report, audited reports? When was the last time any of the government agencies submitted their audited reports? How up to date are they? And why are they allowed? They have a board sitting there and there's fiduciary responsibility. And why are the boards are not held accountable for not the reports as stipulated by law on time?
Mr. Joseph, I'm not sure that
state enterprises that fail to do that also.
I was going to say that might be an unfair question.
Is it?
Mr. George, is it? No, is it not? Because it's really a THA, response. Maybe our dear friend Anson.
No, but Stephen, it's something I have commented on repeatedly, and I have chastised the THA, serially for their failures in that regard. Because at the end of the day, you cannot have one entity being responsible for almost $3 billion each year, and you have little or no accountability from them. The Auditor General has repeatedly called them out, and has provided evidence showing that, look, they have failed to comply with this, they failed to comply with that, they failed to comply with the other, and they just have no regard for any sort of transparency, accountability, or the fundamentals of what we would call good governance. And that's where it starts. That's where it starts. So that's why when you hear the cry saying, look, give Tobago more money, I have no difficulty with that. But my point is, first of all, you must know what you're going to spend it on. It cannot be just you put in the majority of it in your recurrent expenditure. You have to have some infrastructural development projects, some things that would create the crucible and the environment for a nurturing business culture. You have to set those things in place. Otherwise, you just wasting time. You just basically pouring money down the drain.
Okay, and
just be clear, I meant all state enterprises and city councils, corporations, T&Tech.
Okay, we got you. We got you, Mr. Joseph. Yes, for making putting that on the table.
Joseph asking the same questions of the private sector.
Yes, indeed. Well, we just like to remind our listeners that you're listening to and viewing the not the Citizens Community Forum. We're going to have that. I caught you there. We just like to remind our listeners that this is our post-budget panel discussion 2021-2022. And we have an esteemed panel with us, and of course my co-host here. We are discussing the matters relative to the budget. Now, I wanted to sort of go back to Mr. Remy, and we were talking there a short while ago about some of the issues relative to labor and how how you get that mindset and that change within that particular sector. But Mr. Remy, I just wanted to read something here, and this came out of the budget presentation on Monday last, and the Minister of Finance, we heard some sweeteners on Monday. He says, Madam Speaker, we are moving to settle outstanding wage negotiations in the public service. I have instructed the Chief Personnel Officer to commence in 2022 outstanding wage negotiations with the relevant representative trade unions in the public service. Now, before I continue, I heard that, and it's quite rightly, that the Minister of Finance does not have that power to instruct anybody. But that's another. That's another question. But let me continue. I've also been advised that several nurses in the regional health authorities are employed on temporary contracts. As a result, I have instructed the Chief Personnel Officer to investigate again this situation and its implication for pension arrangements and recommended solutions to ensure that the employment contracts of these nurses are regularized. I expect this exercise to be completed by the end of December 2021. And then he goes on to talk about the daily rated workers. But the thing is, he's proposing. Mr. Remy, do you, you would, I'm sure that you probably would have heard this before and probably in previous budgets as well. But this, time in 2021, 2022, what are your hopes? What are your aspirations?
Even that again, you all pose me hardest question. Hopes and aspirations for a settlement on wage negotiations that have been outstanding for we in 2014, in 2021. That is 7 to 8 or 9 years now. That's one thing. The issue with government daily rated pensions. This is something, since I was involved with the trade union movement, I've been involved over 20 odd years, that they have been talking about this pension plan for government daily rated workers. They were part of FITUN, and we led their Shiraz could attest numerous representations in the government to regularize that pension since in the 90s, and nothing was done. And all the minister is saying is, we are moving to, we would investigate this. So the investigation for the nurses is going to be completed at the end of the year. But the issue here, you know what the clincher is? The linkage to pension. We have been saying all along, the government needs to regularize that issue with pension. Right now, in certain public servants, they're part of a non-contributory pension fund. And it is a drain on the consolidated fund. I think the Economist will tell you that. And that is another challenge. That's one of these transfers and subsidies we talk about, which is a disparity with the other public sector workers who have to pay and make a contribution to the pension fund. So that's one issue. The promise to settle negotiations. The minister is saying he's instructing the CPO. Then the minister must say why he interfered in the free and fair collective bargaining process.
I know you were going there, sir, but go ahead, please, develop that point.
And because it has no offense, because the minister has no authority, if he says he has authority, then by his authority he has committed an offense. By telling people don't engage in the union negotiations, and I'm now instructing you to come in. So he has admitted his guilt. So to me, it's just pandering, and he went on the public platform on Friday and said the union asked for 3 things, and I gave them 3. They give them 2 promises again. Nothing material that we could see that could say there is expectation that there's going to be a resolution. So what is going to happen? The CPO is going to say, I am waiting instructions from the minister to commence negotiation. The minister will say 000. We start the whole delay again. 2023 budget, we'll have the same pronouncement. 2025, we are going to pass on, and the new generation is going to inherit that challenge to deal with the public sector negotiation. It is frightening. And I have a real issue with the promises. We need to have, if we had the tripartite process in place, then those things would have been able to be discussed in a meaningful manner, and we would have been able to arrive at some resolution. We have been asking for that every meeting at the tripartite advisory council, and we have no response. But it is budget, and as Mariana said, you have to say the right things to appease your political supporters, and the minister did that. Very well, the narrative there. Look, what is the situation with Petroleum Steel? Let me be controversial. Where is the promise of somebody to get the bid? They said a new bid was opened. I was part of the committee that did the first evaluation with the patriotic. That didn't succeed. Where we are with that? We're talking about foreign exchange. It was an owner of foreign exchange. Yes, they had their situation, which was created by the politicians. How do we deal with a situation like that? The employment in the catchment areas, the fence line communities has ground to a halt. We even lost in tax revenue. So we have to understand that we face some of the challenges that we are facing now. And one thing I wanted to defy, I think, the minister talked about an ease up of the SME. I am happy for that. But where NIS is concerned, I am very concerned. Again, he's interfering with a tripartite body. The NIB is a tripartite body. He talked about ease up on the collection when the NIB already said that they are not collecting enough to sustain the benefit structure that they have. That is a dangerous pattern that we are sending for political purposes again.
Joe, Mr. Cummings, with your permission, Joe, you can remember the retirees who belong to FITUN. They were living on $800 per month and died in poverty and died in fighting for those monies.
Yes, I remember there were several protests. Yes.
Trinidad and Tobago that serve our country for 30, 40 years. And they died in poverty. Yeah, and this is what is hurtful to people like Joe and myself, who sit with people and hear their cries make representation, and nothing are being done for the ordinary man. Those people used to come from all walks of life, not so, Joe?
Yeah, from all Toko, Matura, and all the places who work in the Ministry of Work, and they went home with absolutely nothing.
Nothing. And
Absolutely
how could an individual live at the age of 80 and 90 years on $800 per month? People understand when these people give their service in the postal service in so many areas, and they couldn't get their money and they died.
So I want to ask.
I was sitting around the table with them. Those were people I sit for years around a table with, and I don't know how politicians will have a different dinner and breakfast and lunch while those people eat crumbs.
All right, Mr. Khan.
No God-fearing person could ever do that to their people.
Okay. My co-host wants to come in here.
So I want to ask our panelist, Mrs. Mary King, is there some modicum of light at the end of the tunnel, given what we've been hearing by both the Minister of Finance and the Leader of the Opposition?
Or is there a train that we see coming in the opposite direction?
The people.
I wanted to ask Mr. Remy, though, is this really the right time to be asking for wage increases when we
Why
are
not?
in a recession?
Let me ask my question. No, we are not asking for wage increases, Mary. We are asking for outstanding negotiations to be settled since 2014 to 16, prior to the pandemic, prior to
You're aware, the minister, you're aware that in 2015, they had to find $6 billion to pay the public servants who had just finished a negotiation under the PP. So we know that that is a drastic situation. That's right. But we're talking about real life here. We're not talking about dreams. We are in a situation where this government cannot, at the moment, give increases in salary.
Could we stop the price increase then, so that the purchasing power of the dollar will remain the same? Can we?
No, you also
my dollar is eroding. My dollar is now worth 50 cents than it was before. And I have to buy in
so you're making the case.
What
You're making the case for diversification and changing the culture and getting leadership that can bring the country to some stage of development. That's what you're asking for, and I agree with that. And we've been asking for years and years and years. We even developed the model, the innovation system diamond. We took it around the country in 2010.
We are a nation of promises.
You were probably at the franchise. We took it around the country in 2010. We got buy-in.
Okay, Miss King, Miss King, there was but
I think we need to get down to the basic. What do we need to do to restructure this economy? And that is the only discussion that should be going on now.
Okay, wonderful. But there was also a question posed to you, Mrs. King, from my co-host, and we wanted to sort of have you respond to that quickly before we move over to another of our panelists. Yeah.
Is there some light at the end of the tunnel?
And I want to add to that, or is there a train, coming in the opposite direction?
And I say the people.
Well, I think the light at the end of the tunnel can only come if the citizenry wake up and realize that there's only one way out of this, and that's diversification, it's restructuring, it's new leadership, it's people with vision. There's no point talking to me about digitization and digitalization. That's only a tool. It's just like a man with a saw, that's a tool. Digitization only makes things more competitive. We have to restructure this economy so that we use all the tools, all the skills. Singapore has 1,000 PhDs in its research institutes. That's where we need to be heading, not talking about wage increases. And we'll get the wage increases when we restructure. It's
but
common sense.
Singapore got there with collaboration between business, government, and labor.
Exactly, and he had a team of experts since 1962.
This is exciting, but we need to do that.
And we did not get a
final
team of
thoughts.
experts together. When we get a team of experts together, we get jealous and we disband them.
All right, Ms. King, I know that this is a discussion that we can have.
I'm loving it.
This.
Well, if we're serious about the economy, it has to happen.
Yes, indeed. And, we just like to remind our listeners again that this is our post-budget, our 2021-2022 post-budget panel discussion on the FBI network. I'm Stephen Cummings with my co-host,
Errol Lewis.
Yes, and very, very important, enlightening discussion this evening. Gentlemen, ladies, we almost to the end of our post-budget panel discussion, but before we do that, there's so many other areas we really wanted to get into, and I think we can probably get some of those questions in, as we come to the close of our program. And I want to sort of go back to Mr. George and in terms of the property tax. I know that has been an area, a sore area for some, and maybe good news for some, bad news for some. And I heard that there is some campaign that is going to be launched, from the side of the opposition, because the honourable opposition leader did say during a previous discussion, I think it was even mentioned in her budget, that there's going to be some kind of reaction to the property tax. Now, we all know that this is, we've been paying taxes for what? Land and building, and this goes way, way back, in the decades. Mr. George, your view on the property tax issue, how do you see, not just, your view on the property tax, but do you believe that we are going to be successful? I'm hearing that we need to get to some 50 plus of, the percentage in terms of persons filing before any kind of collection can start.
Well, the thing is, apart from the palpable absurdity of having a 7-page document, which is like an exam paper that you're asking the ordinary citizen to fill out, and you're holding the sword of Damocles over the head of the the ordinary person, saying that if you don't fill it out and submit it by November 30th, you'll be subject to a $5,000 fine. Separate and apart from that, inanity, you have the fact that when you look at what is required there, many of the documents, much of the information that is required, you have to get it from government departments that are still functioning on skeleton staffs. Most times you cannot even get an appointment to go in to get copies of your documents. If you want copies of a deed, if you want copies of your certificate of title, anything of this sort, you don't get these things quickly or easily in normal times, much less in this pandemic. I mean, I can tell you, as a matter of fact, we have registered deeds with the registry, and then they tell you come back in 2 months to get the certified copy, or 3 months. So how are you then going to tell the ordinary citizen that, look, you are going to fine them $5,000 if they can't get this done in time? You also look at the questionnaire that this 7-page document is. It's really almost like you are doing the work of the valuation division. You are really acting almost as your own valuator to value your property for yourself, because they don't have the staff for it. So, I mean, while we understand the need to collect taxes and to bring in revenue, it just doesn't seem to make sense the way this is being rolled out. And then, the thing is, I don't know why the government is being so economically myopic in relation to this issue of the property tax, because at the end of the day, we already have what is in essence a major property tax, which is actually front-loaded in the form of the stamp duty, right? Because if you think of it, any property purchase, it attracts stamp duty except where you have the exemptions. Then what the government needs to do is probably look at removing the exemptions or some such measure, and they are actually getting a whole lot more. When you consider issues, Stephen, such as the net present value of money, which any economist or financial person could tell you, the government collects a whole lot more. So in other words, if on the sale of a property for, say, $1 million, if the government collects maybe a lump sum, right, of 50,000 or 60,000 in stamp duty up front, that is way more when you consider if that money is properly invested and the interest you earn on it and the value of it, than if you collect little driblets of maybe 300 or 400 per month or per year from that same person, from that property. So why are we making this so difficult when all you need to do, look at your stamp duty, which is already in place. Nobody complains about it, and I'll tell you why. Because what happens is that for even the the small individual who is taking a mortgage, that is usually factored in as part of their loan arrangement. So therefore, you are given that money as part of your loan facility. So therefore, it really doesn't seem to make any sense, the government, carrying on in this manner about the property tax. And you basically acting in an oppressive manner to the ordinary citizen in a way and in a scenario where your own government departments are not even able to facilitate the information required.
Okay, Mr. George. We would have to kind of leave it there at the moment. But before we go, we'd want to just, if we can get each of our panelists just to give us probably 60 seconds, no more than 60 seconds, just your closing remarks. We can't go over our time allotted to us. We can probably just go back to my co-host here and just to have some closing remarks from our panelists quickly.
But I wanted to ask for some closing remarks on the panelists, and maybe you can tell me why you have to, you're going digital, and so you have to go online to get a document and then print it and then carry it in. But we start with Mrs. Mary King. Your closing remarks, please.
60 seconds.
60 seconds.
Well, it's really a short order, 60 seconds. I want to thank 98.1 FM for the opportunity to have a discussion on the budget. I don't think there's enough man in the street participation in this budget. Yes, we'll have panels with the chambers all over the place, and that's for the chamber members, but the people don't really get down to it. What one of my own groups that I'm a member of, sorry, not my group, I'm a member of a group that is now planning to take a run around the country, including Tobago, and discuss the issues in the budget and try to see if there is any particular understanding of any part of the diversification that we need to get involved in. And I think that would be a great move, because the man in the street has to understand what's going on. Then he would know when he can ask for wage increases and when he shouldn't. I mean, things like this I think are important for education, not just mental health and physical health, but knowledge. You have to build the knowledge of your population.
Thank you.
I think that's an indication that we should have Mr. Remy just 60 seconds.
I'm going there. 30 seconds.
Go ahead. I enjoyed this intellectual discussion. There's no nothing negative about it. I think it was very healthy. I want to commend this station also, as Ms. said, and hope that we can have this thing for a longer period. Because what happens, I have to say my coin. No offense to economists or anything like that, but too much of the budget debate centers around what I consider to be controversy. People talk at a particular level and talk down to the average man on the street, and they don't get a chance to have an input. It's a ritual that takes place every year. So the man on the street will sit down in their huddle in their little corner, and no one is able to talk to them in a meaningful way for them to understand how this budget directly impacts them. It is our responsibility in the trade and credit union sector, and we will continue to do that without fear or ill will. As the Prime Minister said, we took an oath to represent the workers, and we'll do that without fear or favor, because we have an obligation and a responsibility to do.
Ms. Lee Rivieres.
Very good.
Your 30 seconds. I think your mic is on mute.
Your mic, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I continue from the point made before with how persons can show resilience. I think what the budget needs to do, what the budget needs to embrace, one, they need to look at the revision of the Mental Health Act. They need to look at establishing a properly composed and functioning mental health council. While some aspects of that might have been done, there needs to be proper follow-through, and not just start up. You need to have a development of a national mental health strategy. Certain aspects of that have been done as well, but how does it trickle down? How does it reach into the communities? We need to look at fair funding for mental health. Yes, we know what is allocated for the Ministry of Health, but what is it for mental health? And is it all going to the hospital, to St. John's? Is it reaching the communities or the persons who need it? Also, the budget needs to look at better access to mental health services, more human resources, more staff in communities, in health centers, in So it's not just you have to go to one major place to see these persons, but more than that.
Thank you.
Child, adolescent,
Thank
mental
you.
health care also needs to be looked at. That is critical. What is available is not sufficient. More needs to be done.
Thank
Okay.
Improve physical health care as well for people with mental health problems. So it can be combined. You go for your physical checkup and a mental health checkup is done one time with patients, with persons, pregnant mothers, prenatal, antenatal.
Thank you very much.
Ongoing annual public education. My time is up.
Yes.
Very good.
Oh, Lord. And we want to go to Mr. Joseph for 5 seconds.
Miss Mary, a backhand slap when she said the businessmen not paying their fair share. I would like to say that the businessmen who are in the system are paying their fair share. Is the ones who are not in the system, professionals. People are not in the system, and that's, she said, it's about 13 some $1 billion. They call a figure that's slipping through the crack. And then you have the suspect transaction from the bank in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and nothing happens. So when you ask me what God wants is justice.
Okay.
And if you have this operating, these people will be held into account. And that's what's happening here. People have no people, and they know people that slip through the cracks because of knowledge.
Okay, Mr. Joseph, let's just move quickly to Mr. Khan. You have probably 4 seconds.
We're out of time, so
yes,
we have 4 seconds.
Out of time. We have...
One of the things I want to say, right? A lot of farmers, I'm talking about small farmers, have used the technology of internet. We don't need some government, because the government is still using pen and paper and have not grown with technology. We have done that, and we have made progress in our sector. While Ms. King might think that because she's not seeing it, because we're not boasting about it, because we don't have anything like the government resources to use on it. And one of the other things I want to share with Mr. Martin George quickly, if we are waiting 20 and 30 years for release, how could we pay property tax?
Okay, I think we can leave it there at the moment.
Panelists?
I think we have covered. I think we've covered quite a lot of areas there. Errol?
I have nothing to add. I think this was a very vigorous discussion, and obviously we need to spend more time talking about our future.
Indeed.
And I want to commend the station for having this, and thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Well, this has been our
Thanks to the station again. Thanks to the station.
Yes.
And God blessing to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. This has been our 2021-2022 post-budget panel discussion on the FBN network. We'd like to thank all our panelists for being part of this lively, informative, engaging discussion this evening. And once again, my co-host, thank you so much for being part of it. Stephen Cummings. So until maybe budget 2022-2023, we'll be back here again on the FBN network. Thank you so much. And
God bless.
Goodbye.
It's not all about you. It's all about God.
I can't thank you enough, Lord. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough. You keep on blessing me now. Oh.
Don't stop the music. Play the music.
I'm gonna dance and praise Him. It doesn't matter what comes my way. The greater one lives inside. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus.
More of the music you love.
Say, I am anointed to put the enemy under my feet. I am anointed, moving forward, no more defeat.
Listening anywhere and everywhere on your number one family station, Isaac 98.1 FM.
Join our post-budget panel discussion Monday, October 11th, streaming live on our Facebook page and FBN TV on YouTube. Listen and view highlights and analysis from an expert panel with host, senior broadcast journalist Stephen Cummings, along with co-host J. Errol Lewis. From 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., our team of experts, Mrs. Mary King, Economist, Joseph Remy, FITUN President and President of the Co-operative Credit Union League, Trevor Joseph, National and Caribbean President of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, Shiraz Khan, Executive Member of the Trinidad Unified Farmers Association, Miss Deborah Riviears,